boy, it sure is chilly outside. Right now it's like 24 degrees. Well, I'm up in not Knoxville. To be more specific, I'm actually in Oak Ridge, which is just outside of Knoxville. And they're about 3 degrees different compared to Cleveland. So it's actually more along the lines of 21 degrees. Either way, it is very cold. But anyway, you guys, what's up? Chet-Guthrie, the Dream Poet here. And as I stated, I am up here in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. Oak Ridge, Tennessee is better known as the Secret City. For you see, during World War II, this was the base of operations for the Manhattan Project. The Manhattan Project was the site where they enriched the uranium to create the nuclear explosives that detonated on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Anyway, the Secret City, it was such a big secret that at the time FDR didn't even know what was going on here. But he, anyway, people kind of figured out what happened when Truman ordered the fat man to be dropped. But anyway, guys, I'm up here. I'm going to check out the Y-12 museum. There is another museum in this area, but I think I'm going to save that for another vlog. But since we are in the Secret City, there is a very important figure that prophesied the creation of Oak Ridge National Labs and the Manhattan Project. And his name is Joe Hendricks. And his grave is in a neighborhood. Quite literally, his grave sits in a neighborhood. You can visit this grave. It sits right next to this house. It's 123 Hendricks Drive. As you all can tell, there's still a lot of ice and snow on the ground. I was going to go out to Alvin York State Park, but it simply got too cold. Same thing for Cordell Hull State Park, as a continuing goal for 2025 to see all 59 Tennessee state parks, but it is simply just too cold. That's kind of why I chose to go to a museum today, one that's been on my list for a while. But here he is. Here's the grave of John Hendricks right in front of this house. And if you all don't know the story of John Hendricks, he was born in 1865, right at the end of the Civil War. And he lived a mostly normal life up until, I think he was in his 30s. His wife and children left him. It left him very heartbroken. And I think he did suffer another very tragic event. But what he did is he decided to fast, and he decided to camp out amongst the wilderness for 40 days and 40 nights for any spiritual guidance from God. Well, as he stayed out in the woods, locals, they got very concerned. So they put John Hendricks in an asylum. Well, at the time it wasn't called an asylum, it was called the poorhouse. But John Hendricks, he proclaimed his faith in God, and he got out of the poorhouse, and he said that this place will burn not too long from now. And well, about a week later, that poorhouse, or lunatic asylum, whatever you want to call it, gets struck by lightning, and it burns to the ground. Some people took that as a sign, others still thought John Hendricks was kind of a nut. But story goes on, he starts having these visions that the small town of Oak Ridge, which is only about 3,000 people at the time, would grow to an astonishing number and be a very important player on the world scale. Railroads would come through in certain areas, and many people would come to know the little town of Oak Ridge. Well, that was 40 years ago, prior to World War II. And all those things occurred, again, 40 years after John Hendricks' death. So that's why they say he is the prophet of Oak Ridge. And I will say, they did go through a very important task of saving his grave. But his grave is right next to a house, neighborhoods. This is a very interesting, I guess, a very interesting man and a very interesting story and a very interesting place for his grave. So now that we have visited the grave of John Hendricks, we're going to go to the Y-12 Museum, and we are going to look at the history of the Manhattan Project. And I will say, as I'm out here, I actually do have a bit of a tie to the Manhattan Project. You see, my name, or my full legal name, Chester, well, which is also my dad's name, which was also my great-grandfather's name, and Chester Truitt, he was a welder on the Manhattan Project here in this area. Well, although he was from Cleveland, but with Chester Truitt, my great-grandfather, he was not allowed to talk about what he saw all going on here at Oak Ridge. It was very much tight-lipped. Like, I mean, it was Fort Knox kind of tight. My great-grandfather, he said if anything slipped out of his mouth, something would happen to him. But anyway, that's just the story with Chester Truitt, my great-grandfather. But anyway, my hands are cold. Let's go to the museum, where it's way warmer. Now, before we get to the museum, I wanted to stop by this place. It's very interesting and very reminiscent of the past. And what that is, you might be wondering. This is the original stop point for Oak Ridge, or Y-12. Like where they did all the work. Imagine, back during World War II, this is where they would stop you to get your badge, or to keep you from going, or to make sure people on the outside, here's the other building, did not find out what was going on here. It's cool that they have this. I'm glad that they still keep it preserved for the most part. Like, look, that's where they would get your badge. Looks like for the most part they've kept it up pretty well. Yeah. And just behind me is Y-12 that they still do a lot of stuff in. And, well, still a lot of stuff that goes on at the Y-12 labs is very much confidential. Still a lot of government stuff that goes on, and there's probably a reason why it's confidential. It's not aliens or hiding the existence of Bigfoot. It's probably that they're working on other things, other things like different energy sources and all and whatnot. But yeah, they let you know that you can't cross this area. Y-12 emergency response boundary. For questions, you can call that number. But yeah, I can't go much further beyond this point because I don't have clearance, and I am just a civilian, a guy with a YouTube channel. Well, let's read this historical marker, and it'll tell a little bit more about this station area. Bear Creek Checking Station, ensuring what goes on here stays here. Known as the Gatehouse, checking station that you see before you was constructed in the post-World War II years. It was operated by the United States Atomic Energy Commission and controlled access to the Y-12 plant from 1949 to 1953. As the city of Oak Ridge opened to the public on March 19, 1949, access to the Y-12 plant remained restricted, built with concrete and bulletproof windows. These silent sentinels serve as a reminder to the heightened security, I'm guessing that's security conditions that existed during the early Cold War years. Two other identical checking stations controlled access of the K-25 gaseous diffusion plant, Oak Ridge, and K-12 graphite reactor, Bethel Valley Road, virtually unchanged. And I can't really read the rest of that, but yeah, here is the Bear Creek checking station. And as I am driving to the museum, Bear Creek Road, Y-12 complex, right or next right, badged personnel only. So yeah, if you're driving down this way, to the right, that will take you to Oak Ridge. We're going to the museum, which is right over here. Kind of interesting. You also can't fly a drone, but also there's the big sign. Y-12 National Security Complex. So yeah, even to this day, they still use Y-12, or the Y-12 facility. But as times change, they've become more open. I mean, everybody knows, just about every major government has a nuclear boom boom, as I call it. But anyway, still there's a lot of stuff that probably gets looked at that the rest of the world would probably freak out if they knew what was going on. Oh yeah, look, there's... Anyway, let's get inside the museum, shall we? I'm just cold. This is very interesting. In order to get to the museum, you actually have to be paged in with security. That is pretty darn cool. But anyway, you guys, let's check out the museum. Let's see what they have here. I mean, from what I was seeing online, they do have a replica of, I think it's the little boy explosive that detonated. I can't remember if it was Hiroshima or Nagasaki that little boy was dropped on. Anyway, I imagine you see a lot of strange things in East Tennessee. Yes, right through these doors. But there's the New Hope Center. Well, what goes all the way through there. But this is what we have come to see. It is there is a lot of interesting history here in this tiny little museum. And speaking of little boy, here's that replica I was telling you all about. Imagine the original one. Like, I mean, you hear like the stories on how powerful a an atomic or weapon is when it's achieved critical mass. Like, I mean, this thing is maybe about 9 feet long. Yeah. It's actually cool because you hear about it in the history books, but it's like a whole another different beast when like you're standing like right next to it, or a replica of it. It too makes me think about the movie Oppenheimer. That was like the first detonation of one of these things. Anyway, over here, it actually talks a little bit more about little boy. Right here. Little boy was a gun-type device that achieved critical mass when a subcritical uranium projectile was fired through a gun barrel at a subcritical uranium target. When the projectile and target met, the uranium mass became critical and the chain reaction began. When Little Boy was dropped on Hiroshima, it was Hiroshima, on August 6, 1945, Y-12's mission was a secret no longer. The project was so shrouded in secrecy that the word uranium was not to be uttered. Now that part I didn't know about, the word uranium. And here is a wall of all the different types of artifacts that they have here at the museum. Emergency exit only, watch for trains. And look, that's how they did all their badge identifications. You've got visitor, unclassified, civilian access. Looks like the civilian stuff was all paper. But when you get down to the people that actually worked here, it was plastic. Makes me think about what my great-grandfather had when he was a welder here. I think he was a welder here at Y-12. I have to ask my dad. Of course, since we're talking about nuclear boom booms, you have nuclear attack survival kit, an all-purpose mobile survival kit, kind of stuff that you would see during the Cold War. Let's see, the steel plow point was found at Y-12's west end on the former farm of Jasper Springfield, near the boundary of Anderson and Roane counties. The point was embedded in a large black walnut tree on the bank of Bear Creek. The plow point had been placed between the trunk and branch to likely use as a ladder, or later. The tree grew around the forgotten item until creek erosion brought the tree down, freeing the plow. Oh, that's interesting. Let's see, and what's this? These are Cold War examples of radiation measurement equipment which provided warning of the presence of radiation that could measure how much radiation was present in an area or a potentially contaminated project. Oh, Geiger counters. Kind of makes me think about the HBO docudrama thing. You know, when they used them and they realized that, what do you call them? Anyway, there was enough radiation to kill a man going on within a couple of minutes. Kind of scary to think about. The guard and fire departments were part of the plant protection group until 1984. Looks like they have a display box of all the different types of badges. Men change house. Well, of course, since you're talking about stuff like what we're talking about, that's pretty important because radiation can get on clothes. And my grandfather, he actually worked at TVA, so I mean, he worked around, I forget which one my grandfather worked at. I think he worked at Sequoia. And anyway, up until my grandfather died, you guys, he had to have periodical checkups. And one of the things that he got while working next to nuclear stuff is his thyroid just never worked quite right after that. But he did live to be about almost 90, so my grandfather did do that. The stable isotope program began at Y-12's pilot plant building 9731 as early as 1945. Scientists at Y-12 were experimenting with separating elements other than uranium. Big One device, blood in Gemini, was designed to carry blood samples during the Gemini 3 mission. It exposed them to controlled amounts of radiation and helped scientists understand the effects of space travel can on the human blood cell. The design, fabrication, and testing of this device was done at Y-12, making this one of the earliest projects at Y-12 for NASA. Interesting. Of course, we have some more NASA stuff. The Apollo Lunar Sample Return Container or the Moon Box. Oh, that's what the moon rocks came back in. Huh. That is cool. It was a vacuum sealed container. and looks like it was made from a solid piece of aluminum. And looks like we've got a pictorial map of Y-12 way back in the day. It's like Manhattan Project photographer Ed Westcott was responsible for most of the photos in this room. Until Little Boy was dropped on Japan, Westcott was the only person in Oak Ridge with the reservation allowed to have a camera. His visual documentation of the Manhattan Project construction facilities and workers, along with outside of work life in the community, was invaluable in our understanding of how the course of the world history changed in these valleys. And by the way, if you guys are curious, this talks a little bit more about the Manhattan Project. The city of Oak Ridge, Tennessee did not appear on any official maps until 1949. Until then, few knew it existed, and even fewer knew its purpose. From early 1943 to 1949, Oak Ridge, then known as Clinton Engineering Works, was essentially a large military base home to tens of thousands of civilians. The city was surrounded by fences and guarded access points. Security was even more restricted the closer you got to the mysterious new plants, Y-12, K-25, and X-10. Like I said, I can't remember which one my great-grandfather welded at. And across from that, you have making an atomic boom boom. Gosh, I hate YouTube's policies. Building a uranium boom boom would only be successful if the Manhattan Project could separate enough uranium-235, an isotope that accounts for 0.7 of natural uranium, from the far more prevalent 99.3 of natural uranium-238 isotope. To ensure its success and hedge his bets, General Grove simultaneously constructed multiple plants in Oak Ridge and even focused on a different and largely theoretical method, an electromagnetic process at Y-12, gaseous diffusion at K-25, and later thermal diffusion at S-50 plant on the K-25 site. Huh. Then you've got some more stuff. This is an actual quote from someone. We were told that whatever we saw or heard, we didn't tell anybody anything. If somebody asked you, what do you do over there, you could say, well, I don't do much of anything. You didn't tell them anything about Oak Ridge. If they caught you talking about your job or asking too many questions, you didn't stay very long. They got rid of you for some reason. We kept our mouths shut like we were supposed to do, and we did our work. Let me see. This is Gladys Owens, Calitron Girl. When the Calitrons at Berkeley had only been operated by scientists, there was a wartime labor shortage. Enter the Calitron Girls. These young women, mostly recent high school graduates, operated the Calitrons at Y-12. Their efforts were vital to the development of enriched uranium, a key component of the Little Boy atomic boom boom. Some scientists could believe young women were operating the Calitrons. The girls proved that they were up to the challenge by producing more uranium at the controls than the graduate students at Berkeley. That is fascinating. And you have some more information right here. It took a village. I've got some older photos right here. People working here at the site. Gosh, it must have been like very kind of nerve-wracking that you couldn't talk about what went on here. But it only makes enough sense. The Manhattan Project, building Y-12, relatively undeveloped land available at a reasonable price, secluded location sufficiently far away from the coasts, and potential enemy observation interference, yet reasonably close to Washington, D.C., New York, and all that good stuff. Recently established Tennessee Valley Authority system provided adequate water, climate favorable for year-round construction, and available labor. So that's why Oak Ridge was so appealing. See, we've got General Groves and Kenneth O. McKellar, Alpha and Beta buildings. Wow, that is a lot of silver. 14,700 tons of silver. Looks like this is construction challenges. Speed was of the essence during the Manhattan Project, both for constructing the site and developing technology which were occurring in parallel. Finding labor was particularly difficult when given the rigid specifications and the fact that most workers had a security clearance. Obtaining building supplies was equally challenging during wartime. Massive amounts of material, such as 38 million broad feet of lumber, had to be procured. Persistent shortages of electric tubes, generators, regulators, and other equipment plagued the electromagnetic project and posed the most serious threat to the project's deadline. So this is what my great-grandfather was involved in, but he was a welder. New Hope Cemetery, located on the site of the former New Hope Baptist Church, is one of 7 maintained cemeteries by the Y-12 portion. So I guess you have to have a permit to go there. And George Anderson. War Department memo. Rabbi. The Wartime Department intends to do a possession of your farm December 1942. It will be necessary for you to move net later than that data. In order for you to quickly, the money for your property will be placed into the United States Court at Knoxville, Tennessee. The court will permit you to withdraw a substantial part of this money without waiting. This may be done without impairing your right to consent the value fixed to your property by the War Department. It is expected that your money will be put in court within 10 days, and as soon as you are notified, it is suggested you will get in touch with the United States Attorney to find out how much how much can be drawn. Your fullest cooperation will be a material aid to the war effort. Truly yours, Fred Morgan. So that's how Y-12 was created. Of course, here's the Manhattan Project. Here's a timeline that kind of talks a little bit more about it. Leo Szilard conceives the possibility of using a chain reaction of neutron collisions to release energy. 1939, Otto Frisch observes fission directly by detecting fission fragments of ionization. Niels Bohr realizes that uranium-235 and uranium-238 have different fission properties. Working with John Wheeler, Bohr proposes a theoretical analysis in August 1939, implying that uranium-235 is more visible than 238. Then you have FDR, and receives the Einstein letter warning about the prospect of an atomic boom. September 1943, first alpha tract of cauldrons finished at Y-12, and March 1944, first uranium-235 separated, processed, and shipped to Los Alamos, and thus cueing Oppenheimer, which, by the way, that was a great movie. And anyway, so much history here in East Tennessee, and you wouldn't think that it would be here, but it is. And anyway, you guys, that's going to be another vlog for another day. I'm glad that we had some cold weather, because this is a cool place. I mean, even to this day, it is very confidential. Like, once you go past those company, or once you go past the employee doors. But here at the museum, they talk about something that altered the history of the world as we know it. From a prophecy by John Hendricks to some of the other things around here. It's quite incredible. But anyway, you guys, remember, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon. Always means a lot. Goes to show that y'all care. Now you want to see more videos like this. So without further ado, you guys, this vlog is over. See y'all in the next one. Peace.